Hi, Dani. It's so good to have you on the podcast. I met you at Hack Your Health. I was so excited when I got to see you. And I really want to talk to you about midlife women and how they feel stuck. But first, I would love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, and who you
Absolutely.
help.
Thanks for having me. So, yes, I'm Dani Conway. I got into this line of work because of my own struggles years ago, 65 pounds overweight on a fat free diet, trying to do all the things right, which at that point I thought was hours of cardio every day, eating fat free chicken, brown rice, and broccoli. And that just did not work. So it just sent me on a path looking for something different. I had a lot of food cravings at that point. I craved a lot of fatty foods. I actually craved a lot of ice cream, but looking back, there was never a shortage of ice cream happening in my body. But what I did learn later was that I was not eating enough protein and fat. So I did then just kind of shift. And like I said, that sent me on a path looking for something different. So I started to eat, more nutrient dense foods. I got into the low carb space, more protein, more fat. That eventually led to keto, led to carnivore, and also led to functional medicine because I did get, pretty far as my results went weight loss wise with the diet. Food is always my first thing that I do. Nutrition is the foundation for everything. And then I still had some lingering hormone and gut issues. So I was definitely into root cause healing. I went to the doctor. They said, "Oh, your blood work is normal." Okay, so why do I still feel like crap? And so that just, again, just had me look to see things a little bit differently. So got into functional medicine, really looked at and resonated with the whole root cause healing approach. I like to say rebalancing the body from the inside out. And then, building on that foundation, optimizing hormones, optimizing gut health, and then having that lead into weight loss, body composition, hormone balance, gut, rebalancing gut issues, and all of those things.
So, I'm going to go off in a rabbit trail here.
Okay.
So, well, tell us how you actually came to carnivore and what was that moment that you knew something had changed for you?
So, like I said, I had started into the low carb keto space. This was around 2007. People don't think that this was mainstream now. Let me tell you, it really wasn't mainstream then. And then around 2000, 2013, I kind of had like a flare up of gut issues and some other stuff going on. And I just sort of kind of backed up a little bit and I really just started eating meat and bone broth. And so it was a little bit accidental that I sort of fell into it because honestly, like at that point, I wasn't really sure that eating only meat was a thing. And, at that point, things started to improve. Yes, I still had to work on some, root cause stuff. And then that was just that was just a shift for me, really. And then kind of going from there in terms of realizing, like, I've always had the belief that one size never fits all versus one size fits all, which is what diet culture believes. And so that's where it kind of brought me into, and I was already in practice at that time, but it brought me into kind of working with clients on a spectrum of low carb through carnivore, where some people do not need to eliminate everything under the sun except for meat in order to rebalance their bodies. And yes, I know that's a very unpopular opinion in the carnivore space. To the people that do need to eliminate everything except meat in order to rebalance their bodies. And then the ultimate goal is to get to sustainability and long term results. So for some people, they keep the foods eliminated and they live happily ever after. And for others, they get to a point where they add foods back in and they're just as successful and they're able to maintain their results.
That's amazing. So, you've been doing this for over, I'm talking about carnivore in general, over 15 years. Is that right? Around 15 years?
Approximately.
Yeah. And people say it's not sustainable. Now, I don't agree that every single person needs to be carnivore, but I do think that people need to go carnivore so they can find out where their baseline is and they
Correct.
can actually see what their body feels like without any kind of like chaos or, interference.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And I will say over those, subsequent quite a few years, there were times where I would add veggies back and then I would take them out. And then I would add it back and I would take it out. And then I finally just settled into I do tolerate spices, drink a little bit of coffee. I use beef protein powder, which, that was like, it's way more popular now, but that was like super shunned upon like 6 years ago, like, we'll take your carnivore card if you're going to use protein powder kind of thing. And, I always thought that was ridiculous. Like, I'm not dogmatic. I've always believed that people should do what's right for them. Nobody is in someone's house, prepping their food, walking in their shoes, living their life, living in their skin, and social media is so quick to criticize and judge what somebody else is doing.
Yeah, I'm so interested to ask you like 80 questions, but we don't have time for that. So, what do
We
you
can
think
do
kept you?
the parts
I could
too.
try. So, what kept you here in the carnivore space with the spices, with the coffee, when so many other diets come and go? Like, what made you think, this is a little different?
Because this was the only approach. We'll group the low carb through carnivore in this particular context because that's where I started. That worked for me. When I say worked for me, I lost weight and I maintained the weight. I continued to change my body composition. I was able to rebalance my hormones. My gut has never been better. So all of these things reinforce feeling good basically and waking up in the morning and feeling like I was satisfied. I wasn't craving other foods. I was eating delicious food. I mean, I love meat. I love good fat, good quality fats. And this is what my body thrived on. So it wasn't an argument for me every day to wake up and think, my gosh, I have to eat oatmeal for breakfast, but I don't care for it. I don't feel good after I eat it. I'm hungry an hour later. So it was like how my body was responding that kept validating, quote unquote, staying here, or however you put it with the question, and not deviating.
Yeah. So when women over 40 come to you and they're frustrated, they feel stuck, and they think they've tried everything and nothing works, what is the first thing you look at?
So I actually look at quote unquote how they're doing carnivore because
Mm.
I cannot tell you how many women are doing carnivore that is not in a way that is metabolically sound, let's say. And I know that sounds crazy because people are probably thinking, well, it's carnivore, you just eat meat. No, you'd be surprised how many iterations I see when someone gives me their food log and I'm like, here's all the mistakes that we're making that we have to fix just from a food standpoint. Forget about the underlying hidden imbalances, hormone issues, hormone changes that are happening, gut and detox that are affecting the hormones, all of that. So there are things like women are consistently eating too little at the beginning of the day and saving it for later because that's what we did when we were dieting, right? But that ends up backfiring. I see my favorite two terms. One is liquid grazing. So people are grazing over their, fatty coffee, fatty bone broth, whatever you want to call it, for the first 3 hours of their morning. Well, guess what? This means that you're literally dripping food into your system for 3 hours a day. That, and then my other favorite term is called carnivore grazing. You would be shocked at how many people do not realize that they are actually grazing over carnivore foods throughout the day. So what that might look like is a few strips of bacon with a cup of coffee when they first get up. And then a few hours later, they're having 2 eggs. And then a few hours later, they're having some string cheese. And then 3 hours later, they have lunch. But they don't have at least 30 grams of protein. And then 2 hours before dinner, they're having pork rinds. And then they're eating dinner. And then they're eating a Greek yogurt after dinner. So I know it sounds ridiculous, but I kid you not. The amount of times I see this on logs from the women that come to me is shocking. I'm not surprised when I see it. But I say that because the audience is listening. Probably most of them don't even know they're doing it because what I also hear is that, my gosh, that food log was eye-opening. I really didn't want to do that, except I noticed X, Y, Z, A, B, C.
Yeah, it's crazy. One of the things that I see is women either don't eat at the first part of the day. And so they're literally not hungry because they had a little something that tided them. And then they wait till like later in the day and they're like, I just don't want to eat that much. I didn't really eat. Or I'm not hungry all day. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, fasting all the time is not the ideal, especially if you have, health issues that you're trying to heal. Most people are like, go harder. Let me do this harder. And I'm like, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah, so I have sort of an approach that's part of my fat burning protocol for women over 40, and a little piece of it is called fueling before fasting. And what that means is that we have to make sure that a woman is fueling her body correctly in her eating window before she starts either adding fasting back or fasting in general. So number one, that doesn't mean that for one day you eat correctly in your eating window and then you start fasting. That means that for 2 to 3 or maybe 6 months, you eat what you need in your eating window and dialing and fine tuning those macronutrient ratios as well as energy intake. And then at that point, you can start intermittent fasting. And when I say intermittent fasting, I'm not talking about OMAD. I'm talking about 14, 16 hours max. That's first. And then second, if someone says extended fasting is the only way I can lose weight, that is a huge red flag, right? Because I downgraded. They've down regulated their metabolism so that it's slowed down and that's the only way they can lose. So we have to do a whole host of, metabolic conditioning, for lack of a better word, and help them kind of bring that metabolism back up. My goal for women is eat more, weigh less, not eat less, weigh less. So very different from traditional diet culture.
It's amazing. So, when you teach women how to eat macros or nutritionally dense food, do you give them specifics for their height and their weight? And how do you figure that out?
So I developed a macro formula that I use called the Undiet macro formula many years ago. And so that's the foundational formula that I use. I take their stats, yes, their weight, yes, their height, their goals, their health background, what their eating background has been. So eating disorders, restriction dieting, all of that kind of stuff. I look at what their goals are, and then I factor in other complaints from hormone imbalances to gut issues and all of that. So all of that is part of the Undiet macro formula that gets all the factors that are considered for creating the right energy balance of both quantity of food as well as macronutrient ratio. Because ratios themselves don't tell us much about how much we should be eating. So that's a big misnomer. It's a lot of misinformation about that because we hear, I'm just going to eat 80-20. Well, guess what? 80-20 is going to look a lot different at 1,400 calories than it is at 2,300 calories. And this is a total rabbit hole, so I'm just going to keep going. What other factor that women don't realize, because we hear so much about, high fat heals hormones, is that too much fat in the absence of protein will absolutely cause cravings and hunger. Yet this is so counterintuitive because women think, we're eating high fat. Fat is satiating. I'm not going to be hungry. I'm not going to have cravings. There's a whole other conversation as far as body composition and muscle mass and all of that, as far as protein amounts go. But just in the context of the, high fat thing, is that again, too much fat in the absence of protein can cause cravings. So back to your question, a lot of factors go into, what I give as a macro formula. And for some women I work with, the first formula we use is the perfect formula. For other women, I have to adjust it 10 times before we get it right. And those adjustments can be based on whether or not they're still cycling, what's happening throughout their cycles. I do a lot of things cyclically, whether or not they're still cycling. So there's a lot of customization that goes into it that I feel like, with all due respect to everyone out there watching YouTube videos and influencers and trying to get the right answers, it also causes a lot of confusion. And we all know how that goes.
Yeah. So hormones are a huge piece of the puzzle, especially for midlife women. They're treated like they've gotten a disease and they're just doomed and it's over for them, when it's really when they're coming into their own. They're becoming wiser, more grounded, and they can offer that wisdom to younger people. But they're told that this is automatic. Once you hit 40, you're going into perimenopause. It's over for you. You're kind of like sat on the shelf. And I'm like, that's not even true. First of
And
all, what you put in your mouth is going to determine how your body feels. So if we put clean, nutrient-dense food in your body, then you're going to feel a lot better than if you just keep eating the things and trying to do carnivore over here. It's so funny because we've had people who like sourdough and eat sourdough and carnivore. And I'm like, well, that's undermining. I'm not telling them what to do. I just say, well, what is your goal? Is it to heal? If it's to heal, I know that you like the sourdough, but is it going to let you get the benefits of the carnivore lifestyle and help your body to heal itself? So it's so interesting. Apples, they'll eat, lots of people eat avocados, but I find that if they just cut it down to just fatty red meat, and they're not overeating. Most of them are not overeating. They're undereating. Well, I guess in the case that you said, they're eating a lot. And carnivore is really not meant to graze or to snack.
so I see a lot of undereaters. And even though I was mentioning the grazing thing, they can still graze on carnivore foods, but they're under eating their nutrients that they need. So they're not getting overall they're not getting enough protein and fat, even though they're eating multiple times a day. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that, yes, to what you're saying, I mean, how many women do I hear, oh, my doctor said either perimenopause doesn't exist or we can't test your hormones at this point because it's not going to be accurate anyways, which is, yes, you have to be more strategic when you do the labs, but it's definitely not an accurate approach kind of thing.
Yeah, it's so I was going to ask you, when you have women come in, do you ever have them say, "Oh, I can't eat fat. I can't do it."
So do you mean in the context of like they can't digest it or mentally they're
They mentally do not want to eat it.
okay? So yes, I do have a handful of clients that are still, I call it fat phobic, where we have to go through the mental, help them go, I have to help them go through the mental transition of adding fat is going to provide nutrients versus adding fat is going to make me fat. That being said, a lot of my clients have actually been carnivore for anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, and they've struggled with their results and they've already tried high fat, low fat, everything in between. So they don't necessarily have a mental block with adding fat. It's more about the strategies of how they need to do carnivore and then what they should be doing beyond that for the hormones, the digestion, detoxification, all of that. That seems to come into play more. And then there are some clients who are still struggling with digestion where eating more fat affects them and their gut, which we have to fix or do different strategies like eating cold fats as opposed to warmed fats and things like that.
Do you ever offer them to use like betaine HCl, or I did lipogold and betaine because for 2 years because
Mhm.
I just couldn't break down my food. And there were times, and I know you've heard this before, when I went carnivore, I'd be out in the yard and then suddenly I had to make a mad dash for the inside and it was crazy. It happened for almost 2 years.
Yeah, so I love Lipo Gold. That being said, I never start with HCl because HCl supplementation can cause a lot of problems. If I am suspicious of a low acid production scenario, I like clients to use all the strict carnivores are probably going to lose their mind when I say this right now. But a little bit of apple cider vinegar and water 20 minutes before eating, want them to give their body a chance to naturally produce as much acid as possible. And so I feel like that's a good starting point. I'm also dealing with a lot of digestive issues and pathogens and things like that, where just jumping to HCl production can do more harm than good. So I'm really careful with, those types of things. Now, I don't think that there's anything wrong with trying I don't think there's anything wrong with trying digestive enzymes, ox bile, etc. I'm just a little more careful with HCl supplementation.
Okay, interesting. Well, that's good to know. Now, when you're doing functional like blood work in your practice, why does that matter? And what does it tell like a standard doctor's visit versus seeing you?
Great question. So I'm always running comprehensive blood work in the context of more than just a CBC and complete metabolic panel. I think that's a great baseline. I think that if you can get your doctor to run at least that, it's a starting point. What I normally am adding to that are things like expanded thyroid markers with antibodies, inflammatory markers like homocysteine, fibrinogen, fasting insulin, leptin is related to insulin. What else? Off the top of my head, fibrinogen, full iron panel with ferritin. So all of those are super important. And then the other piece of the puzzle really with blood work especially and any functional testing is the analysis. So how is it being looked at? Number one, are we talking normal reference or optimal reference ranges? So normal reference ranges are like this, optimal are much smaller. And if we're not optimal, I want to know why. And I'm going to figure out how to get the person into that optimal range. And secondly, it's never just about one or two markers. So what does that mean? There's always patterns. There's always, okay, if the thyroid's doing this, what are the adrenals doing? What are these other things doing? What is the gut doing? Is there a toxin issue? Is there a viral issue? All of that. Because the root cause of a thyroid problem or an adrenal problem is almost never a thyroid and adrenal problem. And if you're just trying to take thyroid meds to balance your thyroid, all the doctor's trying to do is to get those numbers look good on paper. If you have a reduction of your symptoms, great. But many women report that they're still trying to make adjustments, yet a lot of their symptoms haven't gone away or they're still losing hair or whatever the case is. And adrenals and cortisol, they're responders. They're responders to stress. So, what is the stressor that is causing them to be out of balance to begin with? It's all a domino effect. So, back to your question, yes, blood work, comprehensive, but the important piece of all of this, to sum this up, is how it's analyzed and to make sure that, whatever protocols and whatever approaches you're going to do match the goals, the struggles, the symptoms, all the foundational pieces are in place, all of that. I think I just went down a rabbit hole, but does that
You
answer your
did. It's great. It's great. So I wanted to tell you, like, have issues with. So let me say this. Do you recommend NDT to any of the people that you work with?
So I don't prescribe any. I work to rebalance the body from the inside out, and we use all kinds of different supplement protocols, peptide protocols, all of that. And I will refer them out whenever necessary, if necessary.
So have you seen people get better? Because like you said, the thyroid is downstream. There are other things that are going on that are causing the
Sure.
symptoms. So for someone who's on NDT, it's interesting to me that it's very negatively looked at in this country. They don't really want to write a natural desiccated thyroid prescription.
Right.
They'd rather put you on T4 or put you on levothyroxine. I think it's a balancing act because there's other things going on. So I think that it can be the thyroid can go from hypo to hyper and there may not even be any symptoms. So it's like, how can someone actually heal and do that without needing adrenal cortex or adrenal support or thyroid prescriptions?
Okay, so let me clarify in case I wasn't clear. I'm not against support for those areas, especially because that can help someone feel better. Therefore, they're going to be more motivated to be more disciplined to do all the things and to progress into, whatever they have to do, whatever that protocol looks like. Right? And I know everyone that comes to carnivore wants to get off every medication, every thing that's considered unnatural, and so on and so forth. I think there's a time and place for NDT. I think there's a time and place for many other things. I'm going to name a whole long list. I think that everything needs to be used in context with someone's purpose and goals. And where one person might want to get off of all meds, the next person might want to feel functional and might not mind being on some low dose of something so they can have the life that they dreamed of living as far as their energy, their mood, and all the things. And I think that we put down all of that without realizing that there can be context, number one. And that here's one very big key is that not everything natural is good and not everything synthetic is bad. And I feel like too many people do not realize this. And so, again, in context of the person, what we're talking about, what their struggles are, if someone has reduced their thyroid meds significantly and they've lost 200 pounds and they've changed everything, they might not care about getting off of the last little bit of thyroid medicine or, NDT or whatever they're using if they've improved their quality of life to the nth degree. So that's where I think context and nuance is always needed. So just like people ask me questions all the time and it's never a hard and fast answer. It depends. Well, this, maybe that. Here's all the things we have to consider. And I think that's the most important piece.
Dr. Sean Baker likes to say it's very nuanced.
It is. It totally is.
Well, for the women who are wanting to do carnivore and they've come in and they keep falling off and they can't make it quote unquote stick, what do you suggest to them?
So in those cases, number one, it can be something going on under the surface that is physiologically affecting their ability to quote unquote make it stick. There can be history with a food addiction, sugar addiction, carb addiction. That can be a big one. And other underlying trauma as well. That can be a piece of the puzzle that would include like nervous system regulation and things like that. Typically, sometimes it depends. A lot of times, though, like in those scenarios, it's something else under the surface, and it might not be necessarily physiological that has to be worked on, albeit nervous system regulation, underlying trauma, something that they're keep on going back to or falling off because of that they haven't realized that they haven't dealt with. And that's a very unpopular opinion because for most people, it's pretty easy to follow a macro formula for a period of time. It's very difficult to face the underlying trauma that was present perhaps 25 years ago that keeps coming up here and there that might be the ticket to what's really keeping someone from their ultimate results. And I think that's the hardest piece of the puzzle. And that is something that I see that affects that type of scenario that you just asked me about.
So, do you see a lot of that where people are coming in and they're wanting root cause healing? They want to lose the weight, they want to heal their body, but they're not willing to actually slow down, set some boundaries, delegate what's not theirs, and deal with their past or, whatever's going on, high stress.
I think that most women that come to me are ready to do all of the first things that you mentioned. What they're sometimes in denial about is that there might be a piece of the past that they still have to deal with. And so I I'm very upfront with clients and I will just talk about the nervous system regulation with them and let them know I can give you some resources, but and we have some strategies that I work with that really work well. But the true underlying trauma stuff, that's out of my scope. So I'll refer them out for that. And if they're willing to do the physiological pieces of the puzzle, the blood work, the protocols, all the things that we're going to be working on, and the other stuff in addition, that is going to be the best opportunity for rebalancing and healing their body that they can have. So if they're willing to do all of that together, that's going to give them the best results. Now, some of them, in all reality and truthfulness, they will start with my side of the spectrum and get kind of going on that and use that as a little bit of, I hate to say it, but I'm just going to say it, use that as a little bit of motivation to then start to get to a place where they feel a little bit better and then they can work on the other stuff. And if somewhere along the way I say, okay, this might not be moving because there's this other piece that maybe we need to kind of have you look at. Most women I would say are open to that. It's definitely more challenging because like I said, it's a lot easier to follow a supplement protocol and a macro formula than it is to go deal with old trauma. I mean, let's face it, right?
That's so true. Yeah, it's a lot of work. Okay. Do you come across women who have been in the 1,200 calorie range and they think that's their magic number and you have to do a little convincing or cajoling to get them to be like, maybe that's why I'm here?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that was me, years ago. I had to retrain my mind and I had to go from intending to track 1,200 calories or intending to stick to as best as I could 1,200 calories to tracking to make sure that I was eating enough for my body and metabolism at 17 to 1,800 plus calories. So that's a pretty big gap. And that's a pretty big shift as far as mindset goes when you think eat less, weigh less, but that's not really working. So, yes, it can be some women are, again, I call it a mind shift. We have to work on the mind shift piece. So we add food back very slowly. Other women are like, my gosh, thank goodness I can eat more because I'm really hungry or this isn't working for me or I can't sleep at night or whatever the symptoms are. And they're welcoming, a higher amount of macronutrients, energy intake, calories, whatever word you want to use. Since calories is a bad word on carnivore, I like to use the term energy, right?
Mhm.
Because we want to be able to take in enough energy to have enough energy to expend energy that we want to expend on a daily basis. So all of that being said, again, it's about shifting the mind and looking at, and even with tracking, I know that it's triggering for some people and I get that. So we have different ways to actually track food. But at the end of the day, whatever way works, goal is to be able to realize that you need to be nourishing your body and moving from 1,200 to 17, 18, 2,000 in some cases. That's what's going to feed. We want to feed your body and metabolism so you have that energy that you need.
What about the women who want to eat all the food? They don't want to gain the weight, but they get on carnivore and they're like, my gosh, they just eat a lot of food. What do you say to them and how? how do you help them understand that there is some balance to all of this so that they don't put on a ton of weight when they're
Sure.
trying to heal? Some people do and they don't mind it, but most women I know don't want to gain weight.
Yeah, so so those are so with that scenario, I have those women do a process of what I call reverse tracking. And that is I have them track their food without looking at the macro numbers. So I just want them to put in the app or write down on the journal, the log. I give them what they're consuming, breakfast, lunch, dinner, any other times a day. I just want to know like where we are. So then I look at that and let's say we're talking about someone who might be eating too much. So let's arbitrarily throw the number out of, 3,500 calories. So for most women, that's going to be too much. So with that being said, if they're currently consuming 3,500 and they're struggling with thinking that they have to eat less, I will look at what they're getting and I will literally cut them back 100 calories. When I divide that by 3 meals, that is literally 1 teaspoon of butter less per meal, or 1 to 2 bites less of meat per meal for the most part, maybe 4 or 5, depending on the meat. It's literally that small of an amount where they can start wrapping their mind around it's really not a big deal to cut out 1 tablespoon of butter, one piece of fat that they're not going to eat from the ribeye per meal. Let's say that same person who started at 3,500 and we cut out after 2 months, let's say we cut out 2 tablespoons of equivalent of fat per day and they start losing weight. Great. Then we're not going to cut anything else until they stop losing weight for a period of time. So now I've taken someone who's eating 3,500 calories and they think they need to eat 1,200 calories to lose weight, which is like, oh my gosh, I have to reduce my amount of eating by 2,000, which is like, that makes my head want to explode. We've only reduced it by 2 tablespoons of the equivalent of butter, and now they start losing weight. So it's all about strategy and looking at the individual person and creating something that feels doable for that individual person. And what feels right for you might not feel right for the next person, and it might have to be a different strategy. And that's the difference between trying to implement everything that people see on a YouTube video or 10 YouTube videos that they watch every week, new videos,
Yep.
or, an individual strategy kind of thing.
Yeah. So you hear that, some people recommend, well, you have to eat at least 30 grams of fat higher than your protein in order to heal. Have you like gone down that rabbit hole, or is that something that you think that that's too much fat or it's unnecessary?
I don't like hard and fast rules. And I think that while that might work for a group of people, because I see these types of recommendations on Facebook posts all the time
Hmm.
where it's like a generalized, everyone should eat 30 grams more or whatever the case is. And it doesn't play out like that. So, I can't say like, yes, that works or no, that doesn't. That might work for some people, but it's not going to work for others.
Yeah. But it's like, I talk to a lot of women who have gone the high fat, they've gone moderate fat, and now they're doing lean everything. And they've got to lose like, 50, 80 pounds or more. And they think that eating completely lean and cutting the butter out is going to like completely change their body. And I'm like, hmm.
So here's some food for thought on that because we need a certain amount of fat to help with our satiety, to help with our hormone production, to help with our focus, cognition, and energy, right? So we're cutting, as carnivores or keto or low carb, whatever someone might be on the spectrum, we're cutting out carbohydrates, which is one form of energy. There's two forms of energy for the most part, fat and carbs. So if you're cutting carbs, you can't cut all the fat and expect to feel good. So that's the first thing. The second piece of the puzzle is that your body cannot get the fat it needs for your hormones, brain function, your energy, your mood, all the things from the fat on your body. So let me say that again.
Say it again, please.
Cannot get the fat you need for brain function, focus, cognition, energy, etc. from the fat on your body. So there has to be a certain consumption of fat in order to function on a daily basis. Many people who go super lean, they don't feel badly until a few weeks later. And then they might not realize that it's from going to lean number one. Again, this is where total energy intake matters more than let me just reduce all the fat. And again, strategy is everything. Yes, that's not what I meant. Yes, I've been higher fat and yes, I've been higher protein, but because I've kept my energy intake where it needs to be metabolically, and I'm not restricting calories or trying to eat too little, it's actually more of a high protein and high fat approach that has given me the best results. So that's what I want to see for clients as well. But again, those numbers have to be tailored to the individual person, their body, their metabolism. And many people that do go super lean, yeah, they might see a little bit of drop to begin with. But sustainability, again, what is sustainable? Is eating turkey breast and chicken breast every day sustainable? I'm going to say no. Like I tried that with brown rice and broccoli 20 years ago, but still, it still didn't work.
Exactly. I have heard 3 carnivore doctors say that women should eat 80 to 90 grams of protein a day and 120 to 180 grams of fat a day. What is your take on that?
It's about energy intake. 100 grams of protein and 120 grams of fat is probably about, off the top of my head, 1,600-ish calories. Anyone out there is welcome to check my math. I've been doing this a while, but I'm probably pretty close to being accurate. So there are some people that that's going to be a perfect balance of protein and fat for. There's other people that are going to try, according to the ranges you just gave me, 90 grams of protein and let's go with the top end of the fat. So 150, 160 grams of fat. And those are going to be the women that they're not enough protein. They might have a little bit of cravings, even though they're having 150 grams of fat. That is that quote unquote higher fat percentage, but that's where that total energy intake might actually not be enough, or that balance, because that's about probably 1750 off the top of my head. And that might be enough from a caloric or energy standpoint, but maybe it's not enough protein if they're resistance training 4 days a week. I just, and I know my opinions are unpopular by a handful of carnivore doctors out there, and I don't really care, honestly, because this is just what I see in clinical practice every day for the last almost 20 years. And it's okay if they've seen what their recommendations are working for other individuals. That's totally fine, but it doesn't always pan out. And that's where women get misinformed and frustrated because they try all of that and it doesn't work. It's just like saying you can fix your hormones with butter and iodine. That doesn't work for everyone.
So, what is your take on high iodine? Like a lot of drops of iodine. People are taking
Yeah.
mega 5% mega drops.
Yeah. I
That
think
affects the
that
thyroid.
100%. Number one, they need to have an expanded thyroid panel done. Number two, that means with their antibodies, because not everybody with thyroid antibodies that are elevated does well on iodine. And if they feel great doing that, amazing. However, if they don't, a lot of times too much iodine can cause hot flashes and insomnia, amongst other thyroid issues. Then that's not the right protocol, for lack of a better term, for that individual person. Just like the generalized 80-20, more butter, all of that. It doesn't work for everyone.
There are people out there that it's not called, I'm not going to say what it's called because it's going to call people out, but it's not called reverse dieting. It's called something else. And they are encouraged to just allow, and I tried this for a minute. I have thyroid issues, so I didn't know I was in hyperthyroid at that moment, which is right now. So, yeah, very sensitive to everything at the moment. But I've heard people say that you should just eat until you're satiated. It could take a week, it could take 6 months, it could take 2 years, and let the cards fall where they may, and then pick up the pieces. That you'll heal yourself by doing
I
that.
mean, I've seen that approach fail a million times. Many of my clients come to me after gaining 40 pounds from trying that. So, like you said, some people are willing to do that and gain a little weight. And in the long run, it works out for them. And I think that's great. They end up losing the weight. But I would say there's a majority of women, especially with underlying hormone, gut, and detox issues going on, where that approach fails. And those are, that's a good percentage of the clients I get too that have tried that, with all due respect, it does work for some people. Not my favorite approach. I don't think people should eat till they're stuffed. I think that, especially with a
Mm.
history of eating disorders and not knowing when your full function actually works and leptin resistance that's related, I think that only in many cases makes the problem worse and doesn't, give someone, let's say, the right strategies to really start to take a step back and fix their hunger cues and, that type of thing. That's what I'll say.
I love that. Thank you. Okay. So, what is one thing you wish you'd had known before you started carnivore that would have helped you on your journey?
My gosh. My gosh, I need a minute to think about this.
That's okay. What was the hardest thing about carnivore for you when you first started that you wish you would have known more about it? Was it easy?
So it was easy in the sense that I started eating the foods I was craving. Like I
Mm.
craved steak and I craved cheese and I craved all the foods that we get to eat, that were such taboo foods when you're trying to follow Weight Watchers and count points and chicken, brown rice, and broccoli bro diets. And so it's hard to say because like I got to eat delicious, delicious food. So, probably okay. So maybe I'll say training myself to eat more initially. So I still spent a good few years trying to eat less and stick with the diet approach of eat less, weigh less versus eat more, weigh less. So it still took some time after, I was doing this a few years because I did lose weight initially to then realize that I still had to eat more to achieve continue my weight loss, continue my body composition goals, and then, of course, maintain how I had transformed my body. So, the other piece is that I hate the word maintenance because maintenance for me is maintenance for me is a stagnant state, right? Yes, I
Mm.
want to maintain my results, of course, but I don't want to stop there. I'm always going to be trying to optimize. I'm always going to be trying to build more muscle. I'm always going to be looking at the best next protocols and what I can do personally and how is that going to help my clients and all of that type of thing. So I really believe in continuing the transformation as opposed to just trying to maintain because again, that maintenance for me is a stagnant state and I don't like that.
Yeah, I love that you want to build more muscle because could you, in like two sentences, say why muscle is important for women and explain how they can't bulk up unless they try?
We need a whole other episode on that. What do you mean 2
We're going to have to come
sentences?
back and do a second episode.
I mean, muscle is our insurance policy for metabolism. So the more muscle we have, the more we burn at rest, the more we protect our joints, the better we look when we're naked. I mean, those are all things that are important with muscle mass. If you're really looking to transform your physique, you need more muscle. So, and then as far as bulking up, I mean, I used to think that I was going to get bulky too, but women say they want to get toned. Like that's the thing, right? Getting toned. But what that actually means is that they just want to drop their body fat and they want to improve their body composition. So that takes obviously strategies for progressive overload and doing the right sets and reps and weight and all of that. Again, we can do a whole other episode on that, but that's my short answer.
Going to come back on a part two. Okay, so for women who are starting carnivore, what is your biggest tip and where can people find you?
Thank you. I think just start. And the reason I say that is because people I see all the time. I've been researching carnivore for the last 6 months and I'm still confused about where to start. Here's the thing when you spend all that time researching, that is a secret, silent, self sabotage approach that you probably don't even know you're doing. So just start eating meat. Start what I call overcrowding the foods that aren't meat with the foods that are. So start overcrowding your non carnivore foods with carnivore foods, your favorite meats, dairy, eggs, if you tolerate them at this point, and then go from there. Stop feeling like you have to do all the research. Stop feeling like you have to have all the answers. That will come in time. But again, if you are stuck in a research place, that is 100% a place of self sabotage. And we need to get you away from those old patterns. So
Exactly. Where can we
that's
find
my
you?
all right. So I'm on Instagram at Dani Conway Official. I do a lot of Miss so on Instagram at Dani Conway Official. I love to do Q&A in my stories. I love to dispel misinformation. I try to share as much as possible there. My website is nutritionthenaturalway.com. I also have a private monthly community off of social media called the Wellness Collective, where we do everything beyond diet. So of course we talk about diet and macros and all of that, but everything from hormone balancing to detoxification. I did a series on sexy hormones. I'm just finishing up a vitality reset series on weight loss, fat loss, peptides, all the fancy things. And then of course I have my one-on-one practice. And I do also have my weight loss accelerator program that happens a few times a year. And that's an online program as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to see you in a few days. It's
I
going to be
know. I'm excited
amazing. It's
either. Yay.
coming. Yes. Meat stock. I'm so excited about this. I love that we got to talk in Florida at Hack Your Health. And
Yes.
now we're here. This is going to come out in a few weeks and I'll let you know when that happens. And I'm excited for seeing you in just a few days.
I know. I look forward to it. And I'll send you all my stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.